So Paula, tell us about yourself and how you first became connected with the cantata singer.
I was a sub. This was in David's first season with cantata singers, which he started in the middle of the year, the middle of the season. And Mary Hamilton, a fellow alto, was having a baby. And there was a need for an alto, and it was incredibly informal way back then. So I went over to David's house, I sang something, he made me sight read something, and he said, okay. At the end of the rehearsal period for that concert, I went up to him afterwards and said, so then he said, sure. And that is how I got into cantata singers way back then.
So I think I first auditioned for David in 1998, and I had a disastrous sight reading problem in the audition, and which was really humiliating because I think of myself as a pretty good sight reader. And I came back 2 years later in 2000 and auditioned again, and that was for Harbison's Four Psalms. So that was my first concert, and I was in the chorus for just that concert that year, and maybe the second, I think I was going to also do the second one. And then over the course of the year, I think there were people who couldn't do it in the alto section, and so I eventually sang all 4 concerts that year and the next year, and 22 years later, here we are.
Well, I actually really never auditioned for cantata singers.
So does that mean you're not in?
Yeah, something like that. No, it kind of happened. Ed was looking for a group to sing with, and my husband, who um, also sings in cantata singers. So I said, well, I'll call and find out. He had heard about cantata singers. We're from New Hampshire, so it's a bit of a schlep. But I said, I'll call him up and see, what's the process. And so I talked to this very nice woman on the telephone and said, my husband's interested in auditioning. And so I got to talking and talking. And somehow, about halfway through the conversation, we realized we knew each other because we had been college hallmates freshman year. So Anne Marie Lindquist, who was the executive director at the time, that was very strange. It was a cold call on my part, and here was somebody I had known from many years before. So at auditioned, and I think he was a sub. And at the end of that season, they were desperate. They were doing Hindemith and Vaughan Williams Mass in G, I think. And literally the night before the first rehearsal, Charles Turner called me and said, can you come sing? And I said, are you crazy? I can't do that stuff. I'm not a choral singer. What do I know from this? I was terrified, absolutely terrified, but I'd known Charles from another situation. So anyway, I showed up, and thank goodness Susan Larson, very well-known singer in the Boston area, was there, and I knew her. And I just sidled right up to her because I thought there's no way I'm going to make it through this rehearsal. So I made it. And maybe the next week, I think David had me sing something after rehearsal, and that was it. And then I just started being asked to sing all the concerts. So it sort of came about in a very kind of backdoor sort of way.
My experience with cantata singers came about after I had been doing many auditions for various things in my life to see what I could do with my singing. And I had a talk with Pamela Dalal one day, and she said, you should go sing for cantata singers, because she said it's a really great way to get chances to be a soloist. And so I said, okay, what's one more audition? I've been doing 500 of them anyway. So I signed up, and strangely enough, had to go to the Longy School and sing in the Wolfenson Room. It happened to be about this time of year, and Harvard graduation was going on, and I'm driving into Cambridge to be right on time for my audition, and I got stuck in one of the worst traffic jams in Harvard Square, and everybody's running around in their caps and gowns, And I finally got to the audition. Charles was there, and Diane Sokol was there, and David. And I can't remember if Suzanne, I think, was playing for the auditions at that time. And I walked in probably a good 40 minutes late. And they were kind enough to say, okay, come in and sing. So I did. And I was really nervous. And I thought, I've blown this because I'm sure my protocol of not being there on time is not a good thing. But I got in. And that's where the story began.
How long ago was that, Carol?
Well, I think it was 1995.
I had a similar backdoor, in a way, invitation to the cantata singers. I had been singing with another large choral group for a number of years, 10, almost 15 years, and decided that I wanted to look into smaller ensembles. And so I started to go to other performances and what have you. And somehow I had started singing with another small ensemble, but then I went to heard about a cantata singers concert, and I went, and I was blown away. It's like, wow, this is really great. And so I walked up after the concert to say hello to David Hoose, and I said, "Hello, David. My name is Dwight Porter." And he said, "You sound like a tenor." And I said, "I am." He says, "Well, why don't you come audition?" So I said, "Okay." And then it was somewhere close to that where David and you, Paula, and someone else, maybe Lynn, were walking in Harvard Square. And I was walking the other direction, and I happened to run into the three of you. And David looked at me and says, "Hi," and he gave me a hug. And I thought, wow, which conductor hugs somebody after just meeting them? And so I auditioned and got in, and the first year was 1990 when we were doing slavery documents. And so I was into the cantata singers as a cantata singers person, and then there were another African-American singers who were doing slavery documents, and I thought it was a great experience to, back in 1990, to have that as first experience with the cantata singers.
Messiah was probably one of my favorite experiences. Number one, it's the only time Cantata Singers ever has sung the piece. So that was very, even though I knew very little about the organization, even at that time, because I'd only been in the group for maybe 2 years, it seemed a very special thing because it was the one and only time. And I happened to be about 7.5 months pregnant. So it was very special. I remember it pretty vividly. The soloists were fantastic. I never sung Messiah before. So that was also, I mean, again, not coming from a big choral or even classical background. So much of what I did in cantata singers was new. I was tabula rasa. I call it poor woman's music grad school is what it was for me. So so I have to say that I don't know that probably just because of the confluence of what was going on in my life and what was maybe going on in cantata singers. And I have to say the other really wonderful thing that is the community that cantata singers has been. We're not real tight. We don't go partying and things like, at least we don't because we live in New Hampshire. But um, there are people in the group that you feel very simpatico with, and I've been very fortunate to have met some very very lifelong important friends in that group. So there's that element. So there's more to it, I think, than the singing, but it's the singing that sort of brings us together and creates that community.
I have been in, I mean, it was since 83, although I tapered off very slowly at the end there, doing fewer and fewer concerts. Well, certainly slavery documents, that you mentioned. I mean, that was huge. We doubled the size of the chorus. It was a commission, one of many commissions that cantata singers did. And it was contentious and meaningful in many ways. And I think I was president or vice president or something around that time too. So I was kind of involved with that. So that was terrific. And we did it at Symphony Hall. So there was that as well, which was an unusual experience for cantata singers too. Angeline, you're bringing up the Messiah, which I did not sing in, but it's more a David story, which is that I think the only time I have been to a Messiah as an audience member was when he did it with Handel and Haydn in Symphony Hall. And I understood the Jesus story in a way I never had. And that was very meaningful. Just it changed my perspective on that because of the way he did that piece. So
I find it so hard to pick just one. I sat here before we got on the phone and was making a list, and it was I just kept writing things down. Rake's Progress was one. I found that to be really just,
yeah.
I didn't think I was going to enjoy the semi-stage thing because I'm a stand and sing kind of girl. But that was an incredible piece to be part of. And I thought that was amazing. All the Bach masterworks, Frida auf Erden, which we've done a couple of times. It's always very emotional and meaningful. And then the other just all the unusual stuff, like the Zelenka and Kurt Weill. We did a whole year of Kurt Weill. And then the usual stuff, like the sort of standards, like the Brahms Requiem, which it was such an amazing experience to do with David, even, a piece that I'd done before, the Missa Solemnis, and his discussions of, getting into the scholarship around the pieces and the very specific music theory elements. And, even just last night, how, you enter in the wrong measure here. And isn't that so interesting? Like it should have been this measure or this measure, but you're here and it sounds interesting because it's not in the right place. So all those kinds of things. Yeah. I just feel privileged to have been able to do such an incredible variety of really wonderful and really different and really interesting music at the same time as doing a lot of things that you would consider choral standards, but also new commissions and unusual works. And it's been a real journey.
You mentioned the rehearsal last night. It was really, I mean, I'm an engineer, I know music, but not like a musician would. But I just thought it was so great when he'll say, let's start at the diminished C minor chord. And I'm looking at the page, I'm thinking, okay, which one is that? And everyone else who knows music theory knows exactly where it is. And I'm still trying to think, where is it? So.
Well,
So
last
that-
night there was also a situation where he said start at the poco animato, and there were two right opposite pages. I was like, which one?
Exactly. It's just give me a measure, David. Just that's all I need.
Well, this kind of going back to the language of David and trying to make sure we all understand where we're going and what we're doing and how it's going to happen. But if I can sum up after all the years of the many, many different seasons and many different pieces that we have performed, the programming has been extraordinary. And I said to Lynn, I think it was, we were waiting to go on for a chamber music concert. I said, it's been extraordinary how even when perhaps we didn't really know how to predict the future, that the programming would fall right into what was going on in the world at that time. And that seems to have been the case with this program. And Lynn said to me that was the program he picked way back So we didn't know that we would be doing the polka nest and it would have this kind of significance right now. That's what's bowled me over the most over the years, that we have really been on the cutting edge of how the world is twirling and how we have been able to fit ourselves into it. And emotionally, that has been at times extremely difficult. So, for instance, singing the Friede auf Erden, there were many times where I would be in the midst of that piece and just losing it, emotionally, just not being able to really sing because it was overwhelming, just overwhelming. On a lighter note, I will say, because of the uh, fantastic way that David would take us out of this, as Cheryl is saying, the stand and sing kind of girl, that we were expected to be more than just stand on the riser and sing, but be involved and actively involved in the performances, to the extent that I found myself, I seem to be always the person who was running around the back of the stage at Jordan Hall to get onto the other side, to get onto some podium that I was supposed to be singing on in about 16 measures or something like that. So some of the times the choreography got a little challenging, and I felt a little more stressed out about that than I did about actually singing in front of an audience. So that was he kept us on our toes all the time, all the time.
I would say that you've actually, I think, between the four of you have mentioned some of my favorites. Um, of course, Rake's Progress was interesting there because, I had done a few staged kind of performances before, but this was fun. And since it was, relatively early in my tenure at the Cantata Singers, it was nice to interact with other singers in a different way that wasn't just standing and singing. And so I thought that was fun. Of course, Friede auf Erden, and yes, Carol, I mean, I had tears just flowing. And one of the times, I guess the first time when we sang it twice, because it was so moving, I could barely sing it. And I felt um, David prepares us for pieces so well that they are, at least for me, mostly memorized. So I remember in that moment just letting it go, letting my hands go, and just singing this because peace on earth right then was what we needed, right? And slavery documents, of course, again, was another notable thing. And one of the reasons why it was notable for me had to do with being on stage with many other African-American singers. And also, there was a lot of outreach that happened during the slavery documents, where there were small groups, 4, 6 people or whatever, that would go to different places in the community and sing. And I had the privilege of doing that a couple of times, and I'm not a soloist, but doing that with 3 or 4 of my peers or whatever was an amazing experience. And to go to churches and what have you and sing it and explain what the piece is about. And anyway, I thought that was just an amazing highlight of my time. But as you said, Cheryl, there are many, so many that were just wonderful, wonderful things.
I mean, I don't know that I have very many specific ones, but I know James Liu has been collecting Hoosisms, and it's just his wit during rehearsals is very funny. And I happened to look at a couple of them today. And there were even a couple last night where at one point he said, like, in these 3 measures, I'm bored, and it's not Haydn's fault. I remember a rehearsal of the St. Matthew long time ago, where I think it's the final chorus, maybe, or maybe the first, I can't remember, where the basses are on the opposite sides of the chorus because it's double chorus and double orchestra, and they're trying to trying to keep the both sides together is an enormous challenge. And he commented that the basses from Maine and the basses from California weren't together, that we needed to get the basses together.
Well, understanding that David was such a taskmaster about being on time, that relaxed, I think, as the years went on to some degree. But he was quite uh, precise about, show up on time. And one dress rehearsal, or one of the rehearsals for the Schöpfung, Die Schöpfung, the creation, we were waiting to start the concert. Of course, the orchestra's there and it's union and we've got to be, on the clock. And I remember Mark Andrew, because he was traveling from from New Hampshire, was always just arriving pretty much right on time. And he had the first solo line in the piece, and David's looking around, where's Mark Andrew? And he was coming down the aisle of Jordan Hall, and he started to sing, and I think the whole chorus just broke up
I
and fell
remember.
to laughter because it was, and I don't think I'll ever forget that. It was just such a touching moment, and one of the few times I actually saw David laugh like that during a rehearsal process.
Wait, no, that's not the story. Actually, the story is, I know this story well because the person who said, can so and so play the banjo was Ed. And what happened was, it was the second performance of Slavery Documents, and I believe the mezzo was having some vocal trouble, or she was under the weather or something, in addition to the fact that David just couldn't get that banjo player. So at some point in rehearsal week, Gloria stepped in for
Right.
the mezzo soloist.
Oh,
And
yes.
David was just pulling his hair out about this poor banjo player. And Ed very quietly whispered to whoever was next to him, "Gee, I wonder if Gloria plays the banjo."
I was next to him. I was the one next to him.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
David, thank you. It was a long time. I was so privileged to be in this group, to meet these people, to sing with our orchestra, to sing with our singers. And as somebody has mentioned, you gave us not just the opportunity to do this and to do it with such breadth and such depth, but the community to do it with, which would not have happened without you. The meaningfulness of the pieces, not just the music, but the lyrics and how it all went together. The passion, and as somebody else, same person I think has said, it really was an education for so many of us about music, about the pieces, about arc, which you own better than anybody, making an arc of a piece, an arc of a phrase, but an arc of a season as well, or a program. So thank you. We love you, David.
Thank you, David, for creating such a supportive environment for all of us to function in. The excellence that you demanded from this group raised us to such a high level. So whether we were either on stage singing or sitting in the audience listening to a cantata singer's performance, we felt extraordinarily proud to be part of this group. I will also reiterate that, as many of us have, that the educational environment that was created kept us coming back for more. And if you were a postgrad in a music education, it enhanced every aspect of that. Being able to sing new works and compare them to the masters has really connected that universe together. And I will also add, because I'm a teacher, that having the chance to bring students from where I teach into this environment and give them that opportunity to see how an organization can really function and grow a young musician was extraordinary to watch. We love you, David.
David, I came into this group in my early 20s and I couldn't believe how lucky I was. I had come to concerts and heard the cantata singers and thought, gosh, that's my dream. I would love to be part of that group. And what stood out to me even as an audience member before I joined was just how musically tight and how accurate and how the intonation was so good and the phrasing was so beautiful. I was beyond excited to become part of this group. And I've never had a moment that I didn't feel privileged to be part of it. As everyone refers to the education that I've gotten from you about composers I'd never heard of and pieces that I never would have sung in any other context, alongside interpretations of of masterworks that many other groups do. It was just it's been an incredible privilege, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to be doing that for so many years. We love you, David.
Well, thank you, David. It's been an amazing, I never can keep track, 23 years, maybe? That still surprises me. Um, you know, again, learning so much, not necessarily having, a formal um, education in music, and certainly really never singing choral music. It was eye-opening. And I think the reason I stayed and the reason I enjoyed it is because, unlike so many choral conductors, David expects the singers to be like the orchestra, and he expects the orchestra to be like the singers. And somewhere in the middle, we meet. And I really think that that's the magic. And again, David's deep understanding of what's happening in the music makes it so important for the singers and for the audience. That standard of excellence is maddening at times, uh, but in the end, it ends up all being worth it. So it's been great, and it's been wonderful to get to know you as a friend, um, and spend time outside of music. And I'm I trust that that will certainly continue. So I'm really grateful for that. And I know that it's just really enriched my life. It's enriched my home. Um, it's been a wonderful several decades. And just as everybody says, we love you, David.
So, David, um, I've had the privilege to be in the cantata singers for 32 years now. I've been on the board for 28 years, so that means I got to work more closely with you, not just in terms of the music, but all the preparation for the music and with the other wonderful board members and presidents and other officers. Um, and so on one hand, the experience of creating the cantata singers and creating the work that we do has been a great experience. But that doesn't speak at all to the real experience. When you came on after a number of years, you said that you wanted the cantata singers to be able to change the human spirit, to be able to do something that's not just listening to music, but have it permeate and have you be changed and to leave doing something different or understanding something differently. And so from audience members, I know that that has happened because they've told me that that's happened. But for me personally, I'm a different person because of the cantata singers and because of you and because of the way you've encouraged us to make music, the way that you have challenged us, the way that you have made us better musicians, but also the way that you have made programs and commentary on programs that help us understand the world that we're in and what we need to do in that world in order to make it a different place. So when we had a performance, to me, most performances were not just about performing. It's about exuding whatever that mojo is so that when people listen to us, they would leave changed. And I think that is a unique quality. I always say David doesn't conduct the notes and things, he conducts the music. And so thank you, David, for 32 years, starting off that with that original hug, 32 years of wonderful music making and friendship. And David, we love you, David.